Hello. I'm obviously here solo. Uh, my co host, Jonathan, is not here, obviously. He likes to do this to me when we have these live streams on every Wednesday. Somehow, there's a technical glitch, and he leaves me out here to go solo, which is perfectly fine because I usually go solo anyway. This is the fifth, I think, fourth or fifth such live stream that we've attempted. We've had a couple of guests. It's gone pretty good. We've done a couple just us. And as I said, Jonathan has left me out here to do solo for a while. Today, as far as I'm concerned, the theme that I wanted to talk about, and I know a lot of you are from the UK, from other countries, not from the United States, but yesterday, at least in the States, was our Veterans Day. Kind of a special holiday, I think. It's a very solemn holiday. I myself am a veteran, specifically of the war in Iraq, among other deployments. And so it's a pretty special day when Americans, really of all demographics, congratulate and thank our veterans for their sacrifices that they've given to this country, going back as far as the country has existed. In fact, there was a couple of articles that I've been reading recently about how there's very few left of our World War II veterans. That's not unique to America. It's the same anywhere. And we Americans don't really give them the credit that they're due. We call them the greatest generation. And compared to what's going on now in this country, at least with the current generations, they're by far the greatest generation. Because right now we have, I think, some of the worst generations, whether we're talking about Generation Z or millennials or whatever, the folks that are glued to their phones, that don't know what time it is, and certainly don't know what giving service to their country is all about. Kind of following in the footsteps of our president, Donald Trump, who thinks that everything is transactional. You need to make something. You got to get some money out of anything that you do. And in his own words, people that have joined the United States military and that have actually been wounded or died in service to our country are chumps, or goofs, or fools. He wanted to know what people get out of it. He doesn't understand why anyone would want to join the military. I don't think Jonathan Fink feels that way. And ladies and gentlemen,
He's here.
Jonathan Fink to the worldwide stage. He finally did make it, and
Late for his own party.
what's going on, Jonathan? I was just telling the folks here about, from my perspective, that this is the day after. I call it the post Veterans Day for the United States. Yesterday was our Veterans Day. And I was just talking a little bit about how this country doesn't really give our veterans enough credit, and that comes from the top on down to old Bone Spurs himself, Donald Trump. For those that don't know,
General Bone Spurs, yeah.
yeah, he was given a deferment during the Vietnam War for bone spurs, after his family paid off the family doctor handsomely to write him a deferment. He thinks that Americans that join the military, especially those who get wounded or killed defending our nation, are chumps. Are
Suckers,
fools.
didn't he? What did he call them? He called them
Suckers.
suckers, yeah.
He's
Or
called them
losers.
suckers and chumps. Yeah, depending on
Suckers
what.
and losers, yeah.
Losers is another
Yeah.
one. Coming from the loser in chief. So actually, on the thumbnail for this, Jonathan, I know you saw that. I posted in the background a picture of the American military cemetery in Normandy, France, where many, if not most, of the Americans who were killed on D-Day, June 6th, 1944, are buried. And I asked the question, was it worth it? Meaning, what's going on right now with MAGA and the Trump administration doing what they're doing with the American military? And I want to talk about that during this live stream. was it worth it for all these people to give their lives, not just in World War II, but in any conflict? All the suckers and losers.
I think that's an interesting one because we also had, because it's just been Armistice Day, 11th of November, and a very elderly gentleman, already in his hundreds of years, a veteran of the Second World War, was interviewed by the BBC, and much to the sort of shock and horror of the journalists, he just came out and said, "Do you know what? I lost all my friends, and it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it for the country I live in now. But I would absolutely take exception to that, because the idea that the Second World War was a one-off price to be paid for democracy, and that once you've paid that price, you're good and you're done, and you no longer have to survive and struggle to keep it going. That's the problem we find ourselves in, is the assumption that normal times will go on forever, freedom is free, and you don't have to go through that pain every generation. You hope you don't, but Ukrainians will tell you, they'll tell you that they're now fighting their war of independence. They didn't have to fight it in 1991 because the Soviet Union fell apart. Russia was too weak to reimpose its imperial lust onto its territories, and they had sort of 30 years of almost getting away with it. Although throughout that time, the other reason why Ukraine wasn't attacked full scale was because Russia was able to manipulate their political system, keep them as a bit of a basket case, inject its agents, assets into their system to control it via, various oligarchs. So I think many Ukrainians have sort of woken up to this, like, well, we thought we were free, but we were never free of Russian interference. Now we realize that if you want to keep this thing that's precious, you don't just have to fight for it once and then forget it and put it away in a box. This is an eternal struggle to maintain it. I think we've kind of completely forgotten that. And here we are. We're in 1939 or whatever year you want to name it. This is our moment. And unfortunately, we're not rising to the challenge.
No, so I won't say it's a universal problem, but certainly in the West, I think it's a universal problem, meaning what you just said. At least in Europe, Western Europe especially, people have gotten the idea, well, the war's over, the Soviet Union's gone, and Putin's not a good guy. And there's stuff going on in Ukraine right now, but we don't really need to reinstitute conscription. We don't really need to, up our game. We don't need to pour billions of euros or pounds or dollars into our defense budgets. And young men and women don't really need to die again. That's in the past. We're way beyond that. And the term for that, of course, is bullshit. We're not way beyond it. We're in it. And I know that in Europe, they're starting to get that, meaning on the continent, they're starting to get that. Not fast enough, in my opinion, at all. But let me just, if I could, just jump back for a moment again, talking about our post-Veterans Day here in America. And the reason I actually wanted to have that theme or that topic today, just in the last couple of days, Donald Trump gave pardons to, I think it was 77. It was 70 or 80 of the leaders, of the actual leaders who organized our attempted coup, the insurrection on January 6th, 2021. He had already pardoned about 1,500 of the foot soldiers, the violent people who actually stormed inside the Capitol building. But these were the attorneys. These were the people that actually organized it from way before when it happened, and then defended it and tried to obfuscate it, to hide it, to say that it was a Antifa and an FBI mission. He just pardoned these lawyers, including Rudy Giuliani, Cheeseborough. I forget their names, but they're all the leading assholes. They now are pardoned. He just gave the green light to people to plan and take part in treason in the United States after he gave the green light to the 1,500 people to commit treason. Jonathan, do you have any idea? Well, you probably do, what this is going to do, how this is going to invigorate and light a fire under the militias, especially in this country, the right-winged armed militias, knowing that they can literally try to overthrow the United States government, try to shut down an election and kill people. And the president will have their back. This isn't just a travesty for now. This is laying the groundwork for even a bigger disaster in the future, in the near future. We've got an election coming up in 1 year.
This is it. And I think what you're also seeing, isn't it, is the normalization of not armed militias, but it's doing that as well. You've got the normalization of ICE, of people in military uniform dragging people from cars. These are scenes that we saw in Belarus. These are scenes that we saw we haven't, well, we saw it on a smaller scale in Moscow because they haven't had the sort of same level of protests. But we see it in authoritarian regimes. Belarus and Georgia are the two that come to mind. And of course, there are people who are going to normalize say, well, we're not like those countries and it's not the same. But I think if you look at the physical process that's taking place, the optics of how people are treated, the fact that you have unidentified, militarized police that do not show their badges, do not have to take their masks off, do not identify themselves in unmarked cars, unleashing violence. It almost doesn't matter in what it's in aid of, or the sort of justification that's used that maybe defers to some policy or process. It's the physical act of absolute impunity and no due process and illegality on a huge scale that goes unchallenged. That unfortunately seems to be preparing the ground for whatever follows. I'm not sure the Trump regime knows what follows. They're trying to incite some kind of civic conflict, but they don't know when that moment, that spark is going to happen. This is, I think, one of the challenges of history. We look back at the German regime as if everything was preordained, but actually there was an awful lot of serendipity. Hitler got lucky many, many, many times. He didn't meet the resistance internally or externally from Britain and France that he was expecting. And then things like the Reichstag fire, which we long assumed was a provocation by the Nazis. Current historical thought is that actually it wasn't, but it plays perfectly into an authoritarian playbook. So Trump doesn't know exactly when the moment's going to come.
Freudian slip.
But he's creating the environment so that when that moment happens, he's able to leverage it.
Well, you're absolutely right. I agree with you, especially what you were saying about 1930s Germany. But, one of the many things that scares me and that I think is far worse than what happened in 30s Germany is that there is a plan here, a plan that Hitler didn't have, and a plan that Trump would never put together on his own because he's not literate enough, he's not smart enough. But as you know, Project 2025. This was many years in the making. For those that may not know it, who are watching this, Project 2025 was a 900 plus page manifesto, or actually a guidebook to the Republican Party should they win the last election. And they did. It is literally a step-by-step guide on how to destroy a democracy, how to institute an authoritarian Christian nationalist, specifically Christian nationalist form of government here in the United States. So in one aspect, I would have to, well, not disagree, but just add that there actually is a plan here, not from Trump, but from Project 2025, and they are following it. For those of you that may have read it or at least thumbed through it, they are following it, and it's a disaster for us. It's going very, very well for them, and not for us.
And it's happening at lightning speed. I mean, this is the extraordinary thing that I think has taken, and we've discussed this before. Not only is it happening at lightning speed internally, but it took Putin a good sort of two decades before he really started to try to export. I mean, not quite 2 decades, 1.5 decades before he really tried to export, his values and flavor authoritarianism globally. Let's say going global with it. Stalin, it took him a good decade to consolidate his regime before he felt able to really, start projecting that out. And that culminated, of course, in the conquest and occupation of Central Europe. Central and Eastern Europe. People will call it liberation, but no, it was a form of reconquest from the Nazis. Trump is doing this at record speed. We are now seeing, and I'm not here to justify the BBC and its serial failings in some of its sort of news programs and editorial problems, but they are coming after institutions. They're coming after anything that offers a ability to resist, an ability to unite people or create some commonality, or instill, an institution in values or resilience. They're coming after it, and now they're coming after us. So I see this as a process that will be exported aggressively, just as it's also rolling out internally. But again, few people, people in this country are sort of waking up to that this week, but maybe not seeing the full implications of it.
Well, for those again that are watching, I want to ask, because I really do want to bring in the folks that are watching this. I want their opinions. Do you think, and this is a direct appeal to those watching this live stream, that I, or maybe both of us, me and Jonathan, are being too hyperbolic, too sensational? Or are we, just talking about a 5-alarm fire that's not happening? I'll have to say, do we have Trump derangement syndrome? I would like to know, because on my channel, I get it all the time that I'm being, exaggerating, that I'm being too hyperbolic, that I'm saying things that aren't true, blah, 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 lefty, communist, Democrat, and all that. I'd like to know what the people think. Do you think that what we're talking about now is exaggerated, that there is not an incredibly serious problem in the United States, that we don't have a direct attack on our democracy, that with the military deployed on our streets, with the federal law enforcement agencies deployed on our street, masked and taking people off the street, with usually without probable cause or due process, and putting them in detention centers, are we exaggerating this? Is this okay as far as you're concerned? Is that what you think the United States is all about? Is that why you looked up to us, if you ever did? Are we still the shining city on the hill? I mean, what do you think? I mean, I know what I think. You can listen to me anytime on my channel or read my articles. I think we're not doomed, but I think we're in for many, many years of a problem. I think right now our democracy has been destroyed, and it's going to take a very, very long time to rebuild it again. And Jonathan, I don't have the answer as to how far down we're going to go, whether or not there is even a way to salvage a constitutional republic. We're in grave danger, and I'd like to know if the viewers disagree with this, or if they agree.
I think, using the analogy of the East Wing of the White House, I think he's going to want to take it down to the foundations. He wants to reduce every institution that previously, summed up all those values you talked about. He wants to reduce them to rubble, and then he wants to defecate on the rubble. And that is what he is minded to do. Whether he lasts long enough, or the team that surround him lasts long enough to achieve that, it also depends on the amount of resistance they get. But again, let's be honest. I mean, there are a number of people who are actively resisting, but for many, say in the Democrat Party, it seems to be, politics as usual. It's politics in abnormal times, but people are normalizing it. They're carrying on as if these were perfectly normal times, and they're using the usual political responses, which again, in normal times would be perfectly appropriate to do. They're not appropriate against someone who is inclined towards authoritarianism, like Trump, somebody who he shares this with Putin. I mean, I'm not saying their ideologies are the same or their outcomes are the same. I think they value different things. Putin's got beyond perhaps valuing big piles of shiny gold baubles, and Putin hasn't. He's still in the toddler phase of authoritarianism in that sense. They're aiming for different values, but what they share is an idea that there is no concept of win-win. There is win-lose, and that is the only possible outcome in any circumstance. Most politicians, indeed the media, are still assuming that we are playing a win-win game. And unfortunately, that creates an asymmetry, which if we carry on playing that game means we will lose. Why did we win the Second World War? It's because we came to the realization, and the US president especially, that the only possible outcome here, against Nazi Germany at least, is a win-lose scenario. There is no other conceivable outcome.
I'm reading some of the comments, and I want to make sure that the folks, at least on your channel, get to see this live.
There's no folks seeing on my channel because something got broken.
I
Something's
understand
broken.
it, which is why I'd like to divert them to my channel, because it is coming through there. If they go to YouTube at No Delusion Zone, just go to at No Delusion Zone at YouTube. You will see what we're talking about now. You will get the live stream. I just checked, and it is definitely running there. I'm not that great at a technical aspect, but I finally got it going. It's also on my website, Jonathan. I'll let you know, protectingtherepublic.com. I can't listen to that now. Why? There's that delay, and it's crazy. So I can only watch it here. But folks can see this live stream at No Delusion Zone on YouTube. And listen.
And if you're watching it on Silicon Curtain, it means you're watching it later in the non-line version, and that's when I've uploaded it. I think it's because it's chosen a format where it's in landscape and portrait, which is a different option, and something's kind of broken in the process.
StreamYard is offering these new formats where they're putting it in well, like you just said, and it's in a beta right now, and I don't think it's working as good as
it's not. I'm not sure what it's supposed to be doing, but it's certainly broken. I mean, it's listed in my channel as being queued up to go live, but obviously it hasn't. Doesn't matter. People will get to see it, and that's absolutely fine. No, I think this White House. I mean, we talked about the devastation of the East Wing. A lot of people are focusing on the ballroom that's going to replace it. The fact that it is tacky and garish and lacking in class and whatever. I think they're kind of missing some of the point. It was the demolition of the East Wing wasn't just here's a pile of bricks, and that's a route towards getting, my shiny gold monumental bauble built. There's something a lot more insidious going on here, which is that I think the East Wing didn't have zero value for him. He understood perfectly well that it had value for others, and the demolition of it was further testing of limits, testing of impunity. It was a way of defecating on the American people, quite literally. As someone I interviewed earlier, Marcy Shore, said, this is performative sadism. This isn't just, oh, look what he's done because he's tasteless. He is challenging our willingness to fight for values and institutions. And once again, the signal he's got is that there is nothing and nobody to resist him.
Well, and you keep mentioning about him defecating on Americans, which I think is a great image. But did you see, and I want to call people's attention to Trump's own graphic that he put on his incredibly disgusting Truth Social platform, with him being a fighter pilot and literally dropping feces on American cities.
He's also wearing a crown.
Well, he's wearing the crown.
Video.
He's King Trump or King Donald piloting an F-16, and since he's never even been in the military, this is disgusting, and dropping crap all over American cities. This was during the No Kings demonstration just a few weeks ago, and that was his answer to it, to shit all over the American people. Now, let me ask you, anybody that's watching this, and of course, Jonathan, who would want a president of their country whose image of them is to be shit on by their president? I mean, no matter what his policies are, why would you support a loathsome individual like that? I don't get it.
It is quite extraordinary. And of course, I think you have to you can't look at sort of, let's say, rational, realistic politics or political theory to explain it. You have to look beyond that at the function of, let's say, the Russian hierarchical system, which is very much based on humiliation, dependency. That's the system you build if you want to truly, to be in control in that way. And I think what we're seeing there is an attempt to ape or reproduce a system which is absolutely not native to American values. It's got nothing to do with any of the evolution of America's political system. It's not really got much to do with it seems to me, the American way of life, which is naturally to look forward to the future, which is naturally to look and think in terms of abundance. And when you have someone who's rich and you're poor, the impulse isn't to steal all their stuff or bring them down to your level so you can both sort of live in the dirt, the gutter. No, the American ideal is that one day you will have that status and wealth that the other guy has. That's not the way the Russian system works. It is one built on envy, theft, manipulation, control, and frankly humiliation and sadism. But there's a lot of these features that are being imported into Trump's hierarchy. What he also seems to be using, and this is one of the ways the Russian system functions, is that it uses cult manipulation. The Tsar is not just a human; he's a demigod. Not literally, but figuratively a demigod. And I think he's beyond reproach, beyond criticism, but also must be obeyed. And once you get into that way of treating your leaders in a cultish way, something Ukrainians absolutely don't do and have never done, which is why Putin wants to erase them, I see some of these cult-like features being introduced, which is why you can't have a rational dialogue with someone who is down, the MAGA well, as it were. There's very little point of engagement with many. I won't say all, because I have engaged constructively with quite a few MAGA people. I'll be honest. I'm not saying we agree on anything, but I have been able to engage in a sort of dialogue of sorts with many. But some are in such a cultish frame of thought that there's no longer any rational debate or negotiation or dialogue that's possible.
Well, again, they are trying very, very hard to transform this constitutional republic, this democratic form of government, into an authoritarian Christian nationalist government. And part of that is what you've just been saying, that the president is no longer a man, he's a deity. They have said on several occasions, I'm talking about MAGA, his supporters, that he is a prophet directly appointed by God, by Jesus Christ, to lead this country, the United States, out of the darkness. That's very dangerous. Excuse me. And it's exactly what you're saying. When any country raises their leader into a cultish figure, and even beyond that, into a deity, I don't see any way around that until that cult is broken up. I've dealt with cults in the past when I was in law enforcement, and it's almost impossible to deliver someone from a cult. These deprogrammers are usually not successful, and we have tens of millions of cult members in the MAGA cult who believe that Donald Trump is a prophet, is appointed by God on earth. How do you break that spell? I don't know if there's a real answer to it. I mean, I happen to think that it's going to be there to one degree or the other, Jonathan, until those people are gone, literally, until we go to the next generation. I mean, we're going to have to outgrow. I'm not saying they're going to always be trying to overthrow the government when we get rid of this current administration, but it's going to be here. The cult never leaves you. When you get that far down the rabbit hole. And so we're looking at generations until this country has any possibility of getting back on the right track. And that's too bad. I'm not going to live forever. And I'm sorry that I'm going to have to wait for the rest of my life, possibly, to even see the beginnings of setting this country back on the right track. That's just horrible.
I mean, someone I've watched a lot of videos of, and he was on my channel some time ago, is a guy called Stephen Hassan, who was in the Moonies cult in the 70s. And now he's an expert on cult deprogramming. And he wrote a book called The Cult of Trump. And it's very instructive in this sense. The two lessons for that, I think, is that one, the people who are broken out of the cult mindset, there has to be something in them that is already starting to break and falter. It has to come internally. then it does require some assistance, and resources can then be used. But you cannot start with somebody who has not gone on that journey or started that journey themselves of doubt creeping in. The other point is that it's an arduous, expensive, and very time intensive process, which that person also has to commit to a lot of their own energy to complete the journey of deprogramming. Once it happens, of course, they can become extraordinary advocates for it. Some of my favorite atheist commentators, one in particular who's based out of Austin, Texas, Matt Dillahunty, he was trained to be a Baptist minister. Well, he is the most effective person at critiquing, say, Christianity, because he lived it and breathed it and was inside it, and he can see what it is about it that was emotionally connecting and attractive to him to counter it. And the same with Stephen Hassan. It was on the inside. It's sort of perhaps the same with some who became dissenters from the communist ideology. Often they were within the KGB, or most of them actually were in the KGB, as opposed to the Communist Party hierarchy. But that's how do you do that on a scale of tens of millions of people? It seems that actually it's there's no real possibility. I mean, the deity, the cult leader has to die. But even then, even when he's passed, and I'm not advocating for that to happen in a non-natural fashion, let's be clear. I don't think political violence is the cure to anything here. Justice and legal due process is the cure to the scale of illegality. But eventually, everyone's mortal. But even then, it's not necessarily the case that the spell of the cult is broken.
No, look, again, I'll say it. We have tens of millions of cult members here. It was 85, I'm not sure, 80 some million Americans that voted for Donald Trump this time, after all he had done in his first term, after his attempts to overthrow the government, after all his anger, all his threats, all his calling for Americans, for his supporters to unleash violence on people who disagreed with them, on judges, on Democrats, on their families, on the media. After all he has said and done, 80 some million Americans voted for him the third time around, and he got elected. Obviously, these people like what they saw and heard. I've written about this. I called them good Germans. I wrote an article specifically about that. How they like what they saw. Why? Because he mirrored what was actually inside of them. Things that I never thought so many Americans had inside of them. The cruelty, the need for violence, the need to be cruel, the need to have an authoritarian figure, a very strong man, a dictator in charge of this country. I had no idea that so many Americans had these latent desires, but they do. Tens of millions of them. And as you just said, I'll just say it, there's not enough cult deprogrammers on earth to deal with 85 or 80 some million cult members. This is just not going to happen. Just not going to happen. So that's why I'm saying we're looking at generational change. We have to wait at least one generation before we even start to begin to see change. Look, Trump's not going to live forever. I don't want any violence either, but I hope he's not around on the political landscape much longer. But when he goes, he's going to be replaced by somebody perhaps worse, by a J.D. Vance, by a Stephen Miller, by a Kash Patel, or someone we don't even know yet in the MAGA mold. And it's going to continue on and on. They have gotten their claws so deep into the American government. They have destroyed the fabric of what held the government together. They've destroyed the checks and balances in the government. They own the courts all the way to the Supreme Court. They own the biggest law firms. They pretty much own the media now in this country. Law enforcement. It's a scary time. And there's no, I don't really see any off ramp, Jonathan. I mean, I'm not trying to sound hyperbolic or gloom and doom, but I'm looking at reality. And I don't see, even when Trump is gone, that we're going to change that rapidly. You mentioned the Democrats a little while before. They just pulled another cowardly act by giving in to Trump, to MAGA, and to try to settle the government shutdown, which, if folks don't know, we've been shut down here, the federal government, for 45 days. They gave up on their primary goal, which is why the government shut down. They gave up on having to force the Trump administration to ensure that over 20 or 25 million Americans continue to have health insurance. It's called Obamacare. It's an affordable insurance. Well, they gave up. Even though most Americans blame the Republicans for the government shutdown, the Democrats caved. Why? They're cowards. I don't know. They have no leadership. So these Americans are going to lose their health care. Food stamps have already pretty much gone away, even though the courts have ordered Trump to restore food stamps. He said no, and the Supreme Court backed him up. So we've got 42 million people starving, and we've got 20 some million that are going to lose their health care. And the Democrats gave up the fight to try to save that. So, no, we can't count on the Democrats right now, Jonathan. We have a one-party system in this country, and that is what's known as a dictatorship.
And the worrying thing, it seems to me, is that because we now live in a very much a sort of, some call it post-globalization, but we are living in a very sort of global world. I mean, you could argue that we were pretty globalized in the 30s, but that didn't stop us descending into, what happened there. But what you have is a series of technologies that are used here as much as they are in the US, the social media platforms, etc. Not the same ones, but the platforms are the same. And what you've actually got here is the first signs of Trumpism being exported, authoritarian alignment with people who are, let's say, for their own self-interest or for ideological reasons, quite happy to jump on that bandwagon. Yeah, I'm not going to defend the quality of the BBC output on certain topics, but what you've got is an institution, one of the bulwarks in this country against authoritarianism, is a national broadcaster. In societies that adopt a sort of, a total resilience model like Finland, then national broadcasters play a very important role in that. You're now seeing the MAGA assault on the BBC, which aligns with, I would say, certain fringe and extremist interests here. Quite a few, right wingers who are still within the envelope of traditional politics have always detested the BBC, but it especially is useful to the aspiring authoritarians and populists, such as Farage, for instance.
Well, I've been reading quite a bit recently about how Donald Trump and MAGA is making great inroads in England, in the UK, that there is a growing right wing there. Well, you know that under Farage, he's not maybe the most popular individual, but Trumpism is starting to make inroads there. How true is that? Do you see any increase in people that are going down the rabbit hole like they are here?
Well, yes. I mean, according to the latest polls, we don't know what's going to happen between now and then. There could be some extraordinary scandals that bring Farage down. And we're already having hints of scandals and actual scandals, but that hasn't dented him at the moment. But he is potentially on course for an election, a narrow, maybe not a victory, but there's all sorts of things you have to factor in here. The Tory party has come to pieces. Probably one of the most powerful and strongest and long-running political parties or institutions in any democracy in history is crumbled. It's coming apart completely. It's conceivable that based with a near Farage majority in an election, let's assume things go horribly wrong. Let's assume that Starmer continues to fumble the ball. Let's assume that there are further scandals and maybe some black swan event he is tested and falters, some kind of national crisis, where Farage almost gets a majority. In this instance, you could see a rump of the Tory party. Basically, some will jump ship and retire and move off or join other parties, but a core of it may say, well, do you know what? We're going to go into a coalition as a junior partner with Trump. Essentially, he could fold that party in to the core party, and some of that collapse we've seen is a little reminiscent of what's happened to the GOP. Not entirely, because during Brexit, there were many Tory MPs who voted according to their conscience. It led to a period of absolute political turmoil, but people didn't just vote herd-like with whatever nonsense was foisted upon them by the party hierarchy. So I think we're not that as far gone as, I say, the GOP proved to be. But at the same time, this party has imploded. It's a non-party. It's 6 foot under, pushing up the daisies, to use the Monty Python sketch. But yes, we're facing a populist democratic coup, is what I'd call it. And institutions like the BBC, they're trying to get them to disintegrate or comply in advance, I think is the phrase there.
Well, I get criticisms, and we both had criticisms about talking about Trump too much, talking about American politics too much, especially on your channel, because understandably, a lot of the folks are from the UK, they're from Europe, Ukraine, and they don't perhaps see the connection as to why that's important. And I just have to say, as I always do, what's going on in the United States has a direct connection to what goes on in Europe and in England, certainly in Ukraine. I'm sorry, it's still the United States. It's still the richest, or if not one of the top 2 richest countries on earth. It still has perhaps, or it is the most powerful military. And what the political or the politics that go on here are exported, whether intentionally or not intentionally. They're mimicked right now. They're mimicked in Europe. Not just in the UK, but all over Europe, the extreme right is making inroads more so than since the war, since the World War II, or since the Cold War at least. So what goes on in America with our politics, as dysfunctional as they are, is very, very important for folks in Europe and in Ukraine. So I just want to throw that out there. I certainly have an interest in America because I'm an American and I live here, but it influences the entire world, not just for a military standpoint, the economics of it, the insane tariffs, the trade war that Trump has started affects the entire world's economy. It's allowing China to make inroads into Europe that they never had before, and into to Africa, and it goes on and on. So I just want to say, folks that think that discussing what's going on in America with the craziness, the authoritarianism that's happening here, saying that it doesn't affect you if you live in England, if you live in Europe, if you live in Ukraine or elsewhere, just not true. It really, really does. And I think it's important to keep, everyone's eyes on the ball here. And we're going to continue to discuss it, I'm sure, in future podcasts and live streams.
Yes, definitely. And I think we're going to see exporting of it. Also, there's a logic and a mechanic to these kind of regimes, which is, once they have othered internal enemies, and that process will keep grinding on, you have to keep creating enemies. You have to keep that sense of, a fortress under siege going. And of course, we're seeing the potential for a toppling of the regime in Venezuela. I think, unlike Putin's attempt to coerce Ukraine, it will not be met with resistance. And indeed, it's disingenuous to compare it. I mean, Maduro is a deeply reprehensible character who's subverted his country's democracy. And actually, many people would cheer his downfall, even if, and I wouldn't share the method of that downfall, but the downfall itself is to be welcomed, just as the downfall of Saddam Hussein was definitely welcomed. But then you have to question the methodology and the lack of a plan to replace the thing that you've torn down. But you could certainly see that sort of happening. But again, there's a mechanic there, which is you cannot stop, because once you depend on these highs, these moments of supposed triumph, you got to keep them coming, every 6 to 8 months, to keep injecting, that energy into your regime. And it's where that leads. Who knows? I mean, Greenland, of course, is one of those potential stepping stones. But that then becomes, I think, rather significant for this new global disorder, because that creates a pattern of imperial behavior, coercion, and an absolute rupturing of NATO. And I know many of us are focusing on, well, what's Russia going to do to fulfill its extended aim of the destruction of the EU and NATO? And we're focusing on some kind of violation of Estonia, Finland, or other places by Russia as a way of challenging NATO, and NATO failing, and therefore, ceasing to exist as a credible force. Well, it could equally well come from the other end. Trump could destroy it through his actions, because an invasion of Greenland essentially means that NATO is over.
Well, the peace president, and he campaigns on that term, the peace president. He spent no small amount of time criticizing Joe Biden about starting the war in Ukraine, which of course is ludicrous. And he said that he will never start a war, that no wars will start under him. Of course, that's nonsense. You just mentioned Venezuela. He has threatened military action, or at least overwhelming force to take over countries, not just Venezuela. He's now threatened in South America, Panama. Before that, he has threatened, as you said, Greenland, which is indirectly threatening Denmark. He's now threatened Nigeria. He's threatened Canada. He's threatened Mexico. And I know I'm leaving some out here, but the peace president is certainly not behaving very, very peacefully. We have a good big chunk of our naval forces off the coast of Venezuela right now. And, it's the methodology. And I have to say this at this point. I am all for enforcing our immigration laws, for example, and not allowing millions or any illegals into this country. But there's ways to do it, not the way Trump is doing it with the masked secret police force. And I say that because there are ways to deal with a Maduro. There are ways to deal with nations that are allowing or facilitating the transfer or the transportation of deadly drugs into this country, like fentanyl and cocaine. There's ways to do that. It's called law enforcement. It's called interdiction. It doesn't call for invading countries. It doesn't call for being behind regime change. It doesn't call for putting carrier task forces off the coast of countries like that and threatening land invasions, or in the case of Greenland, saying that we need this island for our national security. Therefore, we're going to take it over, and Denmark better not stand in our way. These are the words of a megalomaniac. These are the words of a dictator. And I don't know how anyone on either side of the Atlantic could support a president like that of the United States dealing with his allies like that, and then patting somebody like Putin on the back, shaking his hand, gushing all over him. The same thing with Xi in China. It's just disgusting how he keeps the support of his MAGA people here. I don't know. I do understand leaders of our NATO allies not walking up and punching him in the face. I would, but that's why I'm not a politician. But, they can't do that.
That's why you'll never be allowed near him, David.
Well, I hope not. I understand he smells pretty bad. But yes, I get your point. But they are coming around. They are coming around. Off the record, they are acknowledging that he's a lunatic. He's unhinged. He's mentally unstable. And worse, he's not to be trusted. I think your country right now just put out something, or it was leaked, that they're not going to be sharing all the intelligence with America that they have under the Five Eyes Agreement, which are the English-speaking countries that share more intelligence than they do with other allies. Well, apparently America is going to be cut out of that in terms of the UK. That's incredible. It's disgusting, but you know what? I don't blame them. I think we America should be cut out of all such intelligence sharing. We should become a pariah. I hate to say that. It pains me. It pains me a lot. But what Trump is doing to our allies, to our friends, is just horrible. And it deserves a very, very strong response. No more kissing his ass and genuflecting behind him. Call him for what he is, a dictator and somebody who betrays their trust.
And when someone has got the plague and there's no known cure, yeah, you want to keep your distance. I think this is the scenario. Something I wanted to tackle as well, because whereas and that people are going to find this contentious as well. I need to phrase this sort of carefully, but every religion, well, most religions, especially the Abrahamic ones, will have fringes who adopt violent, coercive measures, but the majority won't necessarily be like that, and that applies to Christianity as much as it applies to Islam and the rest of it. The trouble is, it seems to me that the core reasonable or semi-reasonable people in any kind of ideology, if they do not challenge the extremes of their own system, in some way are enabling it. And many people say, well, that's completely unfair. But unfortunately, I'm afraid that there is an element here. I'm not saying that their belief system is wrong. I'm saying that if they do not challenge the extremes which emerge from that belief system, then they are not taking their responsibilities seriously. And there are many people who actually do challenge that, whether that be in Islam and Christianity. And here we have, MAGA. So my argument here would be that if you are using freedom of speech as a justification for Trump and MAGA, or rather than addressing the problems with that, you were saying, yes, but well, you guys in the UK have a freedom of speech problem, and pointing out that there are various issues. That is one; it's an enabling factor for Trumpism. But two, I kind of get the impression that many who will call out points of view that are being suppressed when it's their guy, when it's their perceived identity, but do not point it out the other way when voices of the center and left are silenced, are entirely complicit in the problem here. And what we're seeing is a process unfold under the guise of freedom of speech and extreme libertarianism. It actually is turning into a process of crushing anybody, not just it doesn't disagree with us, but anybody that holds contradictory views that is not showing deference and compliance. And this is what it's morphing into.
Well, yeah, I mean, what we're seeing here in the States is exactly what you're talking about, and specifically with the evangelical Christians. They are some of the most devout Christians. They're an Orthodox, Christian faith, and they've always been about kindness and compassion for other people, but yet they've not totally, but for the most part, thrown their weight, their political will, which is not insignificant here, behind Trump, behind MAGA. And they have turned their back on all the foul, evil, and illegal actions that Trump has taken and the things that he has said. And in fact, just ignored the fact that he is as unchristian as a rock. They don't care because, as you just said, he's their guy. Why with them specifically? Because he championed. He's behind the free life, the anti-abortion crowd. He himself actually supports abortion and always did before he became president. But when he saw which way the wind was blowing, he decided to go all in with the evangelical Christians and go with the right to life folks, which is the anti-abortion folks. So with that one issue, the evangelical Christians threw their weight, their support behind Donald Trump and just ignored everything else he's doing. And in my opinion, and that of millions of Americans, they totally lost any trust that we had in them. As far as I'm concerned, they're blasphemous. They're the most hypocritical sons of bitches on earth, and I have no problem saying that. If you support somebody like Donald Trump only for a single issue and you ignore all the anti-Christian things, acts he does and says, then why should anybody listen to you? You're a disgrace.
And it seems that, to me as well, there is a problem with, I would say, even reasonable conservatives, just as there's a problem with reasonable leftists who now have an intolerance. They're screaming about freedom of speech, but are intolerant to any views that don't exactly mirror their own. And this is a key problem when reasonable people start to fail to defend the rights of people to say things that they fundamentally disagree with. Then we've got a problem. The other one, of course, is distinguishing between paid speech and free speech. And I think this is the other strand of this, is that many of the arguments for libertarian speech and freedom of speech are confusing the idea of individuals and their right to free expression with organizations that actually have vast resources and monopolistic controls over their platforms. And I think we need to distinguish between those things if we're going to properly tackle this free speech debate.
Well, when you've got an authoritarian form of government like we do have now in the United States that controls the media, there is no freedom of speech. It's the freedom of speech that they want, exactly like you said. If they don't agree with what you're saying, you're not free to say that. In fact, as you know, they've come after people who have just disagreed with them. They haven't said anything threatening. They just disagree. They were critical of MAGA, of the Republicans, of Donald Trump, and the Republicans have literally gone after them with law enforcement and in some cases arrested them or indicted them. And if they were a media platform, tried to cancel their license, to take them off the air, or sued them, or if they have federal funding, to withdraw that funding just for being critical of the government. That's a dictatorship, an authoritarian form of government. And that's what we are looking at now. And so, right now, I'm going to say we have freedom of speech, but to a very limited degree. And to be honest with you, you take your chances if you are critical of the government today here in the United States. If you get to be too well known, they will come after you. When I say they, the power of the state, all the way from the federal Department of Justice down to the local law enforcement and district attorney, the prosecutor's offices under this regime. That's where we're at today. Never thought I'd see it in my lifetime, but I'm seeing it right now. And to be honest, it's getting worse. Our election next year is critical. If we don't have an election, which is entirely possible and should be the subject of another live stream or a podcast, if we don't have an election next year, or if the Republicans win, MAGA wins the next year election, 2026, we are done, Jonathan. We're done. There will not be any more elections. This will be a full-blown authoritarian Christian nationalist government. And I'm going to have to end it on that because I think we're pretty much out of time. But please, the last word is yours.
Well, we're going to track these slide. I think we're also going to try and draw the historical parallels, because I think it's very easy for people, especially in those that are, let's say, territories of empires and former empires. And in that, I would say, the American imperialism is very different to British imperialism, but still you have a sense of uniqueness and entitlement, as all former empires do. Unfortunately, it goes with the territory. And that means for many Americans that they are perturbed by what's happening, but they don't see the historical processes apply to them. We could never have a dictatorship. That could never happen here. So we're going to try to talk about the historical parallels. We're going to try to get guests on the channel who help join the dots, experts in periods of history and authoritarian slides and authoritarian regimes, to help us understand, where the overlaps are, where the similarities are, and also to provide some hope, because dictatorships don't last forever. Dictators don't last forever. They may morph from one authoritarian to another and fail to break that cycle. But there's plenty of examples of states that have thrown off and outgrown authoritarian modes of government. Spain, Ukraine, Central and Eastern Europe. There are many examples from history and examples of tools and techniques and tactics and cultures that are used to help extricate yourself and then fortify your society against a return to the malady of authoritarianism. That's it for today, but we will keep digging into these topics.
And fix the technical glitches.
And we'll fix the technical glitches for all those who are seeing this non-live and missing out on the rich comments that we normally have. And yes, normal service will be resumed when we figure out how to incorporate these new features.
Until then, please remember, blame SteamYard or StreamYard. It's not us. All right. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you,
you folks for watching, and even the folks that are watching it on a recorded later than live edition. Thanks so much. And we'll be back next Wednesday at the same time. So take care. And as I always say, try to stay sane.